I would like to welcome our next speaker, Krzysztof Pachulski. He is from Poland and he is evangelist at Epic Games. And it's my honor to introduce him to you. Hi, Krzysztof. Nice to hear.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
I'm really sorry for being late. Messed up time zones really
Oh,
badly.
it's okay. That's not a problem. We're glad you join us today. I'm turning on your presentation, and the stage is yours. Have a good time, and I'll always here for you at the backstage.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to join this conference. It's very important for me. I'm really with you guys. I hope my talk you'll enjoy it and you'll learn something from it. So let me begin. Hi, my name is Krzysztof. I'm evangelist at Epic Games. Here's my contact info, but it will be also displayed at the very end of this presentation. My role at Epic is basically to support developers. I used to work for Eastern Europe as a region, but currently I'm mostly it's two of us for Europe. So wherever you're from, feel free to reach out. In any case, okay. So let's think a little bit about custom tools, because this is not very well explored subject among indie developers, especially because of a lot of different reasons that I'm going to try to cover as well. And so, in my opinion, custom tools give you this power of easily creating pipelines for your own type of development. So whatever you want to achieve, sometimes some tasks may be super tedious, and you may figure out that you want to create something in a very specific way, and it requires repeating the same steps over and over. And in some cases, if you have something very structured and you can actually define the process very well, you can create those tools for yourself that can take the repetitiveness from off your hands. So you'll be able to make those things very quickly, hopefully. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to optimize processes. You can just optimize some simple things that you find may be done automatically rather than by hand, handcrafting every single thing. Because if you just want to have chairs set up in a circle, you don't necessarily have to put them there by hand, one by one. Let's think a little bit about the tools. So first of all, they do things for us, right? So they help us, they take the load of our minds, and we don't have to care about it anymore, because we know that this tool basically will give us a huge boost in development. They make things much easier, again, because sometimes those things just take time, and you don't necessarily need to spend this time again and again. But also, one of the examples is the geometry tools, right? You can see that there are some things that game developers use a lot. So for example, for blocking out a level, those geometry tools make it much easier. You don't have to even open your DCC software like Blender or Max. You can just use the 3D modeling inside of the editor, and it will just help you to achieve the same things much quicker. And also, you can add new things to the engine, like the geometry tools. Of course, we're not gonna talk directly about tools that are in the engine. This is just an example that has been recently added to the engine, and it made my life already easier, because I'm not a modeler, yet I can now create things, even meshes that are more complex than that inside of the engine. So there are a lot of misconceptions about the tools and creating them. And I'm using this umbrella term, tools, which can mean a lot of different things. But what I mean by tools is essentially any kind of script that may help you transfer, put your task on a different level. So instead of doing things very precisely by hand, you can just order it to do something for you, and it will do it exactly as you want, because you already know how it works, right? So there are some misconceptions, like, that creating tools is difficult, and it is a programming task, and it isn't necessarily, because nowadays in the engine you can use blueprints for that, right? So you don't necessarily have to be great programmer. You can be just barely touching blueprints and have some things done for you already. It doesn't also require just very deep knowledge of how the engine works internally, because you can, like, currently with blueprints and with the new additions to the engine, you can basically just tell the editor to do this thing for you, and everything is covered for you in the blueprint. So, like, it's exposed in a way that it's easy for you to use. So you just say what you want to achieve rather than what exactly needs to happen on each level of the engine. It doesn't require C++ knowledge anymore. So it used to be very difficult to add anything to the editor. Currently, you don't even need to touch C++ at all, although it's always useful. And also, some teams just don't even think about creating tools because they think they need a separate tool programmer in a budget, have it covered somehow this way. Yet, I'm gonna try to prove it that it's so easy that any artist can just pick it up and start using. And so the last point here, so the blueprints and Python are currently very deeply integrated with the whole engine. And I'm gonna show you how deep you can get with your tools just using blueprints and Python, which are very accessible, more accessible than C++, of course, and do some quite decent, nice, advanced stuff. So let's get to the point. Before we do that, I'm gonna just give you one more thing. So the whole deck and also the content that I prepared for this deck will be available for you. So later at the end of the video, there will be a link that you will be able to just go there and download this stuff for yourself. So let's take a look at the call-in editor. Some of you may be familiar with that already. Some of you may not, but call-in editor is basically a blueprint function, or not necessarily, but it can be from C++. But we're gonna try to focus on the blueprint and Python side of the things. So you can add a button that will call this function in the editor. So how this works is you can mark. I'm gonna try to point my laser pointer or whatever you call it here. I hope you see it. So you can see this event in here has this call-in editor selected. I hope it's visible. If it's not, you're gonna be able to see it later in the slide deck, and also in the project, because all this is available to you later on, will be available. So the call-in editor thing is just ticked, and this allows us to add this button which says randomize material, because this is the name of the function, and you just hit this randomize material thing on your actor that is in the scene. And if you even select all of them at once, you can click this randomize material button, and they will all get their material randomized. So, like, it's a very simple thing. This is an example of, like, this exact example is covered here. So I'm just, like, getting one of the materials from the list, randomize it, and just set it to the static mesh that it is assigned to. So yeah, I'm gonna skip the demos because, like, I currently edit the GIFs, so I don't have to jump into the editor and on and off. And we're gonna just cover it a little bit more quickly. If there will be any questions later, I'm happy to jump into the editor as well. But let's try to walk through those things first. So the next thing I'm gonna talk about is editor utility blueprints. So first slide will be just about, like, what it is in general. So this is like any blueprint that allows you to call functions that are just editor based. So this editor utility blueprint, when you create it, you need to create it in a very specific way. So you need to use the editor utilities when you right click. Like, instead of using create new blueprint, you create new editor utility. And then while using, you can use one of those, like editor utility blueprint or editor utility widget, to create a new a new utility thing. And then this blueprint or widget will allow you to use the functions that relate to the editor. Here you can see also that, because you can also create those classes, those types, if you just create a simple blueprint, but you won't have like all the options available for you if you do so that way. So make sure that if you want to use this editor utilities, that you do it with the correct menu option. So this is quite important. So let's cover quickly a few of the types of the editor utility blueprints that I think are very interesting. The others are also quite interesting. I don't know about each of them, but I invite you to explore on your own. And also I'm going to explore for sure in the future, because it's like those are new additions to the engine. Some of them are super fresh, and some of them are just very specific. But the important ones that I think we definitely should cover is like just to explain what those types are. So editor utility actor is just a simple actor that you can put in the scene, but it will be only available in the editor, and it will also be able to call the editor functions. Then the same with the editor utility object. It's just the same concept. So it's a simple U object that you can call, in which you can call editor functions. Then asset/actor action utility is a type of object that is basically adding a special function, a special entry to the menu, so that when you, for example, right-click the asset on your scene, or right-click the actor in your content browser, depending on like which version you created, you will have this scripted asset actions or scripted actor actions added to your context menu, and you'll be able to call a function on this very specific set of assets or set of actors. And then editor utility tool menu entry is just another thing that allows you to add a button to the editor. So there is also editor utility widget, and this one is a separate thing that allows you to create a separate window that you can just create as you would create a game widget, game UI. You can create a separate window and spawn it in the editor, and then just dock it like like your world outliner or like any other part of the editor windows, and have an extra window that will allow you to click on things, on like the buttons, maybe enter some data, and create the UI for your tool that you desire. So let's talk about those editor-only functions that I mentioned, that those allow you to use. So first of all, you get access. I'm gonna look at the right first because it's a bit shorter list. So it gives you access to some of the editor subsystems, and by some I mean like, I don't know, 30 or 50 of them. I never counted them. I mean, you can see this is looping. It's not going all the way through. So like it's going from here to here. I hope you see the pointer. So you can see like how many different new things and options there are. Of course, some of them are very specific to do some very, very specific tasks that may be not very useful for your case, but it already shows how much we try to make it accessible to actually access those features, even if this is not very common in general. And on the left, there is a much longer list. These are just some editor-only functions that are available, except the whole subsystems thing, because each subsystem will have their own its own functions. So like it goes even deeper, and like this is all the things that you can do in the editor just right away using one of those editor utility options. So among other things that are super important and super useful, I picked a few that were interesting for me. Out of those things that we covered, and I think those are just cool to explore. If you are going to look into learning this stuff, I would suggest you creating a tool using each of those features somehow, and just even if it's not a meaningful tool, it's awesome to just use it once to later have it in your tool set, in your tool creator's tool set, so that you will already think about it as something that you can use, because you've already tried it and you know how it works. You've seen what different quirks you had with it. you had to work with. And yeah, so let's take a look at some of those things. So first of all, like get levels allows you to, for example, like get the all the levels that are all the sub levels of the world, of the specific world. You can get different for example, the play in editor world. So usually the blueprint, those tools will work for the world that is created, that is spawned in the editor. So like when you open your editor, there is a separate world where your map is, and then you can go around it and modify it, like, move actors, add new things to your scene. But you can also find a world that is, for example, running on the server or on one of the clients, and modify it with your tool. Or access it at least, and access the data. And there are some of the other things, like, for example, you can have a full control over your repository. So like you can check out assets, you can check out the full directories. You can check out a loaded asset or an asset by path. So you can check it out by just a reference or by path. And also you can use a bulk option, but you can as well submit your changes to the repository, as long as you're using, of course, the Unreal Engine integration for the repository, which we suggest usually do, because it may be dangerous if you don't. So what you can also do, you can actually ask questions to your user. So you can send a dialogue, and then there are multiple different types. You can have a type that says yes or no, or just requires the user to accept and say okay. You can spawn actor from object, which is just the same thing as if you dragged your asset to the scene. So like, for example, if you have a mesh and you drag it to the scene, you are able to edit without creating a new actor you don't have to add a new static mesh actor and then select a very specific static mesh for that. You can just select an asset and create a static mesh actor. For example, you want to spawn this static mesh in the scene, just use this very specific thing. If you use an audio asset, this will also create an audio actor instead. So this is also great for those cases. So whatever you can drag in and drop into the level, you can also use this node to do. You can use this node to spawn it in your level. You can, for example, filter arrays by class. So if you, for example, have your selection, so you can get selection set right here. So if you get this value, like you just have all the selected actors, for example. And then you just want, for example, the static mesh actors, because you don't care about other things than static meshes. So you can just filter them by class. Or you can filter out one class, because you can include, exclude using this filter and do this stuff. You can create a new map and even ask your user if you want, or like if they want to save existing map or not. As well as like get some information like the selection bounds or a lot of different things. And also, by using the tool, you can request the editor to close the current session of the game. So let's take a look at the editor utility widgets. So these are basically just a classic UMG widgets, as I wrote in here, and it means that you can do everything that you can do with your game UI and more. So what it means we have some new additional tools that allow you to just modify your assets in a different way. I'm going to cover that in a second. So it isn't much different than just creating your game's UI. And again, not again, but I have it here in the slide. It's much simpler, because you don't have to make sure that it runs in production. You kind of have to make sure that it doesn't break your game in any way, but it's not that easy to break your game creating a tool that is not being shipped with your game, right? So as long as you can make sure that you're not doing some black magic that you don't understand, you should be very good to go on and do this stuff. The last sentence, I see that there is a mistake, and it doesn't mean anything. But what I meant by this is I meant that it's only your team that needs to accept the UI and the user like the whole user experience that you create. So you don't have to design it in such a way that it's completely foolproof. Because as long as you can brief your team how to use this tool, or yourself, if this tool is just for you, because you can just decide to create one like that, you can definitely skip some design stages, right? So some of the tools just are so simple that they don't need to be over designed in any way or form. You don't have to do any, any surveys, for example, so like user stories and stuff like that. You can just create the tool, add some buttons, add some inputs, and start using it. So let's cover a few of the widgets that I think are like just amazing. And one of them is PropertyView. And PropertyView is just allows you to create. So it creates this widget. You can see here that depending on the type of variable, it lets you change the value directly, and it pops up an editor UI for this. So you don't have to even create a text field if you want to change the name of something, or if you want to create a class, if you want to select a class, it will just spawn a class dropdown. So as long as the type matches, I mean, like, you don't even have to provide it the type. You just give it an object, and it figures out on its own what kind of widget to spawn for the user to be able to change the value of this variable. So whatever kind of variable you have, you can set it in here. So again, let me show you how I set it up. So I'm using this event pre-construct and using this in design time is design time to make sure that I'm only doing this on pre-construction while I'm designing. What it does in here, it just shows me this inside of this editor, of the UMG editor. So you can just have a preview of that. Otherwise, it would just have a text that like there is no object set, right? But because what we are doing here is we're setting the object on this view base, so on this property view base, sorry, and in this case we're just setting it to self because so what you have to do so we're setting the object that this property is on, and then also inside of this single property view we need to set the property name. So there is a class to spawn, and this class to spawn is a variable in this blueprint, and in this case unfortunately this is like done by text, so you cannot just select one of those. But I mean, like, in some cases it wouldn't be very useful if you had to just select one of those. So it's even more flexible this way in a lot of for a lot of cases I'm not gonna get into, but mostly if you are using it on another object or on an object that maybe you don't yet have like very well created. But then I do the same thing. I run the same function like on event construct. So construct happens in the game. So this will happen in the editor. This will happen inside of the game. Sorry, I mean, like, this will happen in this editor here, and this construct will happen when you spawn the window. So not in the game, but if the widget is already in action, right? So hopefully you get it. But again, this helps me just design my window, and this allows me to use it in the runtime, which is a better term for that. We also have a details view, and details view allows you to just essentially show a details panel for a specific object. Just you don't have to select a very specific you don't have to select very specific property, so any variable specifically. You can be just say, okay, yeah, let user use any of the properties that that I want to add to this object. So you can just edit this object just as if you clicked it on the scene. But in some cases, if it's a U object, you won't have that option in the scene in a lot of cases, unless unless you create it in a very specific way. But this allows you to add this to your widget and have it somewhere in your design, so that now in the context of this tool, the user is able to also modify the properties of this very specific thing, which is useful in many cases that I'm going to try to cover in a second. And what you can also do with this, with both of those actually, so property view and details view, you can assign to on property changed widget. So I'm showing just two different examples of how you can do this. So just so you know, like this is the default way. You just assign a function to this, an event, basically a blueprint event to this to this delegate, and it will be called now whenever the user changes any value on this details view or on this property view. If you want not to have this very long cable, or if you want to just move this around a lot and just eliminate this red cable, you can just use create event instead and select this event inside of this drop down here. So then you will just kind of connect this in a way that we will name it here, but it will call this function, right? So you just skip this long connection to this guy. You are able now to connect it here. Let's quickly, before we go to the next tool that I'm gonna showcase, let's quickly take a look at transactions. So transactions allow you to do undo, redo operations, and they can be used in different ways. So first of all, you can start them with using begin transaction and end the transaction with end transaction. And you need to start the transaction before you modify the object that you want to change, so that it creates a snapshot. So actually, like, you need to first begin the transaction and then create a snapshot of the object, so that it can be later reverted to this stage, and then you can modify it to your liking, and and just and then like revert if you wanted to go back to the state from before. Then this create transaction macro makes it a little easier for you, because it just gives you the same functionality in a smaller form. You still need to use snapshot object or transact object actually. So at this moment, I stopped being sure about it, but I think that a snapshot object allows you to it also, like, it does what I just said, but it also marks the object as modified. But if you use transact object, it just adds it to the transaction. It doesn't mark it as dirty, so as modified. This is an example how you can set this up. So I'm gonna just quickly show you. So here we have actually, this may be the other way around, so that transact object marks it as modified. I'm so sorry, I just completely forgot at this point. Anyway, so begin transaction allows you to just begin to just start like creating the snapshots for a very specific thing. You can name it. You can give it a context name also, so that each transaction can be distinguished and from each other. And then what I do here is I just get selection and go for each. So like I just for each actor in the selection, I'm gonna do something. So I'm gonna first transact object, and then I can modify it as much as I want. And for each of those things that I want to modify, I just call this transact object on it. And after I'm done, I'm gonna go and end the transaction. And then I can just Control Z or Control Y to undo and redo, and it all should just work this way very easily. Oh no, I didn't add the demo here. I think I did. I'm sorry. Yeah. So let me just very quickly in the background open this demo. I'm sorry. I've been running here to when I saw the message that it's just starting. So I'm gonna try to show you one of the tools. I don't know why I didn't add the. I do know that. So let me hold on a second. I'm gonna try to make it. I didn't have the chance to open that, unfortunately, but hold on a second. I'm gonna try to show it as soon as possible. Yes, I think we are good now because we have this. I have the editor open now. I'm gonna try to switch with sharing to a different window. So I hope it will work when I do so. I'm really sorry. It's completely my fault. I just messed up with the time zones, and I'm really sorry about it. It rarely happens. So here you can see the chairs being just distributed. By the way, Shift plus E is a shortcut that allows you to select all the actors using the same asset in the root component. So like for example, all the chairs on the screen, and you can see here, I'm gonna explain in a bit how I'm adding this editor button. But when I click this, or I can just go to the tools, and then I believe somewhere here I have it. I'm just not sure at this point where it was. Editor utility blueprint. So it's called actor distribution tool. And in here, I can, for example, just set location. By the way, I'm gonna select live preview so you can see what is going on. So if I set location, I can. So let me first save selection. So when I save selection, all my selection is being saved, and I can, for example, use recall selection, and it will recall the previous selection that I saved. And now I'm working on the set that I saved, and all the actions will be performed on those. So if I click another actor, for example, I can set selection, or if I click two different actors, it will make it that the center point is in between in the average position. So that's why. Let me just quickly get back to this. So if I set location here, I can just use this actor as a marker, or I can use any other actor as a marker. And then I can, for example, use this actor and set the size to this. So I can make it larger. I also didn't plug in my mouse because I didn't have time for that. I'm sorry. But in the meantime, I'm going to just very quickly derail and download something so we can hopefully make it even quicker. And now, if I set this size, because I could just set those things by hand. I could just enter them, by hand, just those values. But I don't necessarily always know what distance it is. I just sometimes want to have this visual feedback. And here I can select a few different things. So I can, for example, make them just follow some arc instead of being distributed across the whole circle. Or I can, for example, even if I use this arc, I can offset it a little, so I can change the angle that they are facing. Here I can set the location and size. Here I can just decide to process only a subsection of those actors. So if I just go, for example, 3 or 4, if I go -1 or 0, it will select all of them, and then I can say what I do with rotation. So if I do keep and hit execute, the rotation will be just quite random. But if I say inside, they will all face inside. If I say outside, I have already a wedding game. I mean, very easily creating just those different little setups of the chairs. And what I can also do, I can shuffle elements by using also keep in here. And in this case, it will kind of randomize this rotation because each of them was kind of covering one part of the circle, and now they're just shuffled. What I can also do, I can make them random rotation and turn off the shuffle elements, and then they have completely random rotation. And whenever I hit execute, they will change. So let me just make them face inside instead. And now I can show you one more thing that I have. And this is the Fibonacci sphere distribution that I can switch to instead of the circle distribution. And now you can see I will also move this up a little. So I will by hand input like 1,500, so 1,500 in here. And you can see that there is already a sphere distribution. And if I have this rotation set to, like, for example, keep for now, I can hit execute. And you can see that they're already distributed evenly. If I want, I can, for example, make them rotate randomly, or make them actually all face inside. And I'm gonna turn off the live preview now. Maybe make the radius a little smaller, so like, I don't know, 400. Yeah, and if I want to create another layer of that, I can, for example, say 600 and then execute on copy. And I have now, let's turn off the live preview. And I now have, like, a lot of those chairs distributed in a way, like with a few clicks of a button. And it doesn't stop me from adding even more of those types of distribution. So I can do a lot of those different operations with that. Let me jump back to the presentation. I'm sorry, I need to reshare my screen. Let me share screen. Okay, don't show these tips again. Window and PowerPoint. So let's very quickly cover how to extend the editor menus, what I showed you already, like with a button. So this is everything you need to do, basically. You create this editor menu extension, and all you need to do is add this very blueprint, the reference, the path to this blueprint, as one of the startup objects, so that it is registered inside of the editor. And you can, I'm sorry. And then like this, those startup objects are you can add to default editor per project user settings in your config. So you just create this file, add those 2 lines to it, and here you can use this event execute. That's not right. I'm sorry. It's not the event execute. Event run is the one that will be run by on the start as they like when you add this as a startup object. And what it does, it just adds a menu entry object and set it to self. So you just add this menu entry that you just defined in here. And this execute here, it will allow you to just call this action using this button. And what I'm doing here is I'm just spawning and registering a tab of type actor distribution tool, basically. And it's added as to the editor utility subsystem. So this is one of those subsystems that you get access to, as I mentioned before. Let's very also briefly cover a little bit about Python, and because this is super useful, and I think this is something that is very unexplored. And if you're creating something a little bit more complex, it may be much nicer to use this this way instead. So whatever you can do in blueprints, you can also do in Python, and actually even more. So you can access the Python module that you just import inside of Python, Unreal, and then you write Unreal dot something, and depending on I'm gonna show you in a second how it looks like. You can access any of the functions that is accessible for blueprints. So for example, here, if you have a blueprint function library that is called like your fancy blueprint function library, as I called it, and you have a function called some function in it, this will be the syntax for that. I'm sorry, I think in the presentation I have online, I've already updated it. This is a little bit later version, but this is not clearly readable. But Unreal dot, the name of your function in this Pascal case, so upper camel case, and also then some function with the underscore and all lowercase, and then all your parameters like you would normally use them inside of Python. There are a few things that it's good to know about Python before you set this up, before you want to use it. And one of those is just to enable the developer mode in Python settings. And then this will generate the unreal.py stub file. And this stub file, so this stub file is something that basically tells your editor so it tells your IDE, like whatever you're using, like if you're using a Python IDE or any tool that is allowed to use Python, it tells it like what for kind of functions you have available, so you can have syntax suggestions, right? And like whenever you are working on the scripts using Python, add a button that will allow you to just reload the script very quickly, because you don't want to write like 3 commands in the editor whenever you like restart your editor or whatever. Like sometimes you just need to, whenever you click the button, you want it to call the function that you want, so that you can just test it. But also before it should reload, so you can just change this function, you can save it, and then hit this. It will reload it and then call your function. So for development, there is no harm in just having this little extra step. It takes like, quite like very, very tiny piece of the second to actually reload this this whole Python script for you. And it doesn't really add any cost, but it helps you, when you are developing this tool, to not need to each time write in your console, reload this, import this, reload this, and because it's not just super straightforward in a lot of cases. Okay, so Unreal Python API is available here, but you can also use the Python stub file, so the file that is generated, to just take a look at what is available, how you can use it, and what you can access. Depending on the plugins that you have enabled, it will be a different subset of things, of course, because like if you enable a plugin, you can also access all its blueprint functionality via Python. And so here I have some examples, like how this piece of blueprint would look like in Python, right? So for example, here we have a path that is a variable, and you have this path equals like /game/your asset. Then you can ask if the asset exists, which you do here. Here you just create some place where you will save the loaded asset, and then you load the asset just calling unreal.loadAsset. So you can see it's very, very, very similar. But in this case, for example, you need to use editor asset library. So sometimes there is some things. So instead of trying to figure it out yourself each time, I would just go to this API, because you can search for things there. And then I would look for, does asset exist? And then this does asset exist will appear for you in the context of editor asset library, so that you know that you need to write unreal.editor asset library.does asset exist. The same goes for the Python stub. So here you can, for example, create a literal enum, which basically means like how do you actually like access different enums from the editor. Here I'm just creating a value directly, and this code in Python would just look like this. So some expression set editor property, and then sampler type. You can see the property name is also here, sampler type, and then unreal.material sampler type _ grayscale. And you can see here material sampler type, right? So it says material sampler type, and then grayscale. This actually sampler type grayscale comes from C++, but what you can do instead is you can take a look in your Python stub or in your API and figure it out on your own. If you want to access some subsystems, sometimes they won't be like accessible like as subsystem. For example, in this case, if you want to get selection set, you go to Unreal Editor Utility Library instead. And some of the things may be a little bit quirky in this regard, but feel free to just go to the Python stub or to the Python API website and just search for the things that you look for and figure it out from the documentation. It's all there. So there is a demo that I have for the material tool that is using Python. Let me very quickly again jump back to this. I actually have something more ready here to show you. Hold on a second. This is here. So I'm gonna now share the screen again. This is the last time I'm doing this, hopefully, because I should be able to show you now a bit more GIFs in here. So I created this tool that if you select a few textures, you can right-click it and select the generate material from that, and it will just connect the things to their respective outputs. Depending, so it actually does it based on the suffix in the texture name in case of my tool. So if I write _e, for example, it will go to emissive. If I write _a, it will be alpha. And also if it's alpha, if I'm adding alpha, it will first of all make the material translucent, so you can see that the material type in here is translucent, as well as everything that is emissive by default is being multiplied by 15. So the whole thing is generated just from the editor. So if you have, for example, a master material and you want to fill this with textures, depending on like what kind of textures you have available, you can create a script that fills those out for you instead of having to. So it creates an instance and fills the textures out for you, so you don't have to do it yourself. There is some things that are available only for you in Python and C++. So like, for example, slow scoped task, you cannot use it in blueprints yet. At least I'm not aware of that. And also like those can be canceled. Here I have just some meaningless example, but it shows that you can actually have a process. So it just waits, right? So it does nothing. It counts to 35 each time, and it just waits for those operations to happen. So it just like, it is a slow task, sorry. And so in this way, you can, for example, start a process, say, okay, I'm starting this process. Now we need to process 150 items. This is what I'm telling it. And then each time I'm processing an item, I'm incrementing this the current asset, and it like increments this percentage here, as well as you can create child tasks as well, and just use this to generate this other progress bar. So each of those processes can also have its own progress bar that goes underneath in here, and you can show that. So it's super useful for lengthy processes, also things that you want to be able to cancel, because then you can also use it that way. So you can see here, I'm creating this slow scope task this way. So I'm using with Unreal slow scope task as task, and then I'm passing it the length of my array, and also I'm saying that it should tell processing items. And then I make the dialog, because if you don't do that, it won't pop up. It will be created, but it won't pop up. And then you can also, instead of using make dialog true, you can use make dialog delayed, and it will only pop up if it takes more than the time that you say it should. So here in the delay, in the delay thing, you can set how much time it should wait before it pops up. So like, for example, if it takes only 2 seconds, you don't care about showing the user that it just like, it's a long task. But in case it takes longer, like tell your user that you are processing and something is happening, so that they are not worried that their editor just froze and they don't know what's going on. And also then you enter process frame. So this way you increment the counter, and then you can also change the title. So here I just formatted some string to also show how many items I've processed already. So it's not only the percentage. Yeah, and if you use this like should cancel, so you could do like if task should cancel. Actually, it should actually say if task should cancel instead of task dot should cancel. Then you can return, which means just like break it. So the same is an example in here. It's just like with the child. No, this one. So this one is the full example. Sorry. and it just sleeps for some amount of time. And in here, you can actually do some processing. Um, the processed items are kept only to inform the user, and it isn't needed for anything in here. But here you can see how it's created with the two of those bars. So first big task will be generated here, but then whenever I'm processing an item, I can actually also create a new slow scope task and then show another like progress bar. So when I'm doing another for loop, for example, or just waiting for something, this happens. To show a dialogue, you can, like, for example, yeah, no, sorry, I cannot. I don't have an example right now. But to show a dialogue, you have an example here, so you can see that you can, for example, ask your user a question, and if they say yes, you can cancel the item. Like this, for example, this loop execution. But if they say yes all, you can cancel all of those items, right? And if they say no, you just do nothing. And you can also just show them just a very simple dialogue which they can only accept, right? Let's take a quick look at some of the extras. So this is the
Sorry,
thing.
sorry,
Yes,
Krzysztof.
to end, right?
Sorry,
Yes,
we don't have any more time,
right.
unfortunately. Um, Thanks for
Just let
sharing
me.
with us everything.
The other slides are going to be available for you, and they're just things that I want to show you. Here's the link to download everything. So the slides are mostly for the user, for you to take a look at. I don't have much more to say about them. So this is all, actually. Thank you very much.
Thanks for sharing, and please, if you have any questions to Krzysztof, please direct them to
Yeah,
him via any possible link. This QR code, this email, this
take pictures of
links.
that. No.
Yeah, just make a screenshot, and thanks for joining us today.
I'm very sorry again. Thank you
It's
very much
okay. It's
for
okay.
having this
Hope we'll see you. Yeah.
opportunity.
Hope we'll see you again. Thanks for supporting Ukraine, and bye bye.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.